This is Burn This Book, a banned books book club where we, Nicolle and Eden, read a banned or challenged book twice a month and discuss its meaning, impact, and censorship to make it more accessible for all readers. This week's book is Mouse by Art Spiegelman, which was serialized from 1980 to 1991. Joining us today is Amy Nielsen, calling in from Florida. Amy, tell us about yourself and your connection to the book.
Hi. Well, first off, I just want to say what huge fans I am of your podcast. So it's a much needed conversation. My connection with this book is, well, I was a librarian for 20 years, first of all. And so I saw firsthand the impact of books on kids and how important it is that they have access to stories and that they can learn from the past and all of that. And I experienced a few banned book challenges over my 20 years, two, I think, over 20 years, which we've had more in the last, I think, 2020. They were like more than there has been in the entire history of the ALA collecting banned book data. So it became a very important platform for me to start talking about the dangers of banning books. And I actually am lead anthologist for an anthology that you ladies so nicely advertised for me called Uncensored Ink, a banned book inspired anthology. And that will be out in October of next year during Banned Book Month. We're really excited about that. But the reason why I picked Mouse to talk about is, again, with what's happening in our climate across our country with the rise in banned books, but also my two daughters and I were in Washington, D.C. in September. And one of the things we did was tour the Holocaust Museum. And it really stunned me that one of the first things the Nazis did was pull books from schools. And so then when I reached out to you guys and I saw that book was on your list, I just felt a connection that I had never read it, and I wanted to explore that and kind of, because it's like a full circle moment, because this book is now being banned. So that's kind of why I chose that one. And I'm really glad I did. I'm really glad that I read it. So thank you again for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for coming. Seriously, we're so excited. And your anthology sounds so amazing. We are, I don't know. I'll let Eden say some things too, because I'm just going to keep gushing about you, Amy.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, like, we're this is our first guest where we've not actually known you prior to recording or talking to each other, and it's pretty exciting to just
A few months ago, I just started Googling. I wanted to find out as much as I could about what people are doing to highlight and address the issue of banned books. And those are the people that I want to partner with, because I think we have an important role. And what you're doing is just fantastic. So as a former librarian and a current advocate for intellectual freedom.
The fact that you brought up being a librarian and you only experienced two challenges or bans during your time, and then over the last
20 years.
Yeah, in 20 years. What books were they, out of curiosity?
Sure.
Do you remember?
The first one was Harry Potter. So my daughter,
classic.
My oldest daughter was 9 years old when she first read it. And it was right when it just came from the UK. So I can't remember the year off the top of my head. I did have that data. But she read it that summer, and she's like, Mom, I really want to do a display case in your library. But of course, you couldn't go to any store and buy a Switch or an owl, a Harry Potter owl or a wand or anything. No. So we went to thrift stores and she made all this memorabilia. And we made this huge display case and put, I think the first two books kind of came to the US at the same time, if I remember correctly, because the first one had been out already in the UK. So we had it all set up. And within the first week of school, I had some mamas in my library saying they didn't want their kids reading about that witchcraft. And so, but back then there was a procedure that we had to follow. I already had a challenge materials committee set up ahead of time. I had to do that every year as a librarian. It had to include teachers, students, family members, community members, anyway, so the challenge material, whoever was challenging the book too, had to read the full book. Well, that ended most of them because they didn't want to read Harry Potter. But I'm explaining to them, like, every Disney movie has a witch, but but in those movies, the witches are villains. But in this one, we're saying that they're the good guys. So that was kind of part of the problem. But that fizzled away because the books became so popular and got kids reading. And then the second one That was the one I had at an elementary school I was there for 10 years. I had one at a middle school and I was there for 10 years. And that was A Child Called It by Dave Pelser, which it is a book about a true story about his suffering of abuse at the hands of his mother. But then he grew up and he went on to become a motivational speaker. And guess what? Real kids have bad things that happen to them, you know? And so to be able to see somebody going through something and coming out on the other side okay, it's inspirational. And even if you haven't gone through that, you know, to read a story of someone really dealing with just a horrific childhood and then using that to help other people. That book did get banned in my entire county. So that was the only one that ever actually happened. So, but now, like we've said, we're seeing it, you know, just the numbers are insane.
And you're calling in from Florida, where Maxwell Frost actually just introduced a new bill or legislation today, or was it yesterday? The proposal is to reimburse school districts where they're fighting book bans because it costs so much money to, like, so many people's time, so much time, so much money to review these books, that parents are just like willy-nilly trying to challenge and ban and remove from shelves. And so he is proposing that those school districts be reimbursed, because that's a whole, like, it could be up, like a whole teacher's salary could be spent reviewing a book. That
And at my son's school, he's no longer there because he's on the autism spectrum and it just wasn't working out at the beginning of the year. But he's in 3rd grade and he's now in a special ed school that is free to do whatever they want, thankfully. But the public school, the teachers had to give a list of every book they were going to read for the entire year to parents before the first day of school, so parents could scratch out any book that they didn't want their children to read or have read to them. And then imagine the work for that teacher every time she reads that book. Then she has to go through and check who can't hear it. And then where do those kids go? And then what about the Scholastic Book Fair and then the new book from Mo Willems or whatever, you know? So it's just, that's what we're dealing with in Florida.
It's horrible. And I think a lot of people, in regards to something else, a lot of people have, not a lot, just a couple, like, honestly, I could count on one hand, have reached out to me and been like, why are you supportive of this? And one person was like, it's so extreme to compare book banning to fascism or to the early steps of a dictatorship. And I've never said that on the internet. I've never been like, this is fascism. I'm slow on that movement, but I am fast on the idea that, yes, we have seen in history this pattern that at the beginning, when a community becomes extremist, they get rid of all of the information that opposes anything that they don't like. So we've seen those patterns. And I love that Amy brought that up, that specifically in Germany, that was such a big part of the radicalization of the community, was to burn the books, burn the religious artifacts of the Jewish communities, of a lot of the different communities as well, and to just burn any information that would counter what Hitler was trying to teach, the propaganda. And so when we're afraid of information, we need to check ourselves, I think. And I think it's okay to have that conversation and to liken that history.
Well, in a book like Mouse, being a graphic novel, I think makes this kind of history, which is important for our kids to know, accessible. My son saw this book sitting on the table. And actually, when I was reading this, I was at the pool. It's still hot here in Florida. And I put a different, I put a different cover over it because I didn't want anyone to see me reading the book by the cover, you know, because they wouldn't know what it was. Because most people are not well read around here.
And it's also a giant swastika in the center. We don't want you to present yourself like a neo-Nazi.
So my 8-year-old autistic son saw this book sitting on the table, and he comes over and he looks at it, and he says, "Mom, why are you reading that book? It looks like it's a bad book." And I said, "It's not a bad book." I said, "It's about bad things that really happened in a war a long time ago." And I said, "And it's important that one day I'll teach you about that because we need to know the mistakes of the past so we don't make those mistakes in our future, or that we're the ones that are electing the people that will stop these sorts of things from happening." So, and it was just a really brief conversation because it's not age appropriate yet. But I wanted him to know it's okay to read about bad things that happened. Matter of fact, we should read about bad things that happened.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
And I think Nicolle and I might be part of the beginning of the last generation to hear from surviving Holocaust victims.
mhm.
I remember school assemblies. I don't know if you had that, Nicolle,
I
where
did.
there were survivors of the Holocaust who came to talk to us.
Mhm.
And we had the benefit of that firsthand account. Nicolle, like you were talking about earlier, how you weren't an expert in the Holocaust. I would say that Art Spiegelman himself is not an expert on the Holocaust either. This is like very much a story of a father and a son connecting over a father's story, which happens to be the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And how amazing that we have this. Is this considered a first-hand account? Not really, because it's a second-hand, right? Because it's Art talking to his father. First-hand would be first-hand would be Anne Frank.
Yeah.
Like how special it is that we have this documented in our history.
I have been researching him a little bit over the past couple of weeks, as I'm sure you two have as well. And I watched an interview that he did in 1992, which was the year that he got the Pulitzer Prize. And then an interview that he did like recently talking about the book being banned. And just like, in 1992, it was like a Pulitzer Prize. And then now this book can't be read in the States. And he's like, it baffles me. It absolutely baffles me. And I think I have in Tennessee, where it was banned, the school board meeting, the reason they said it was banned was because it features some foul language and nudity, which there's 6 curse words, 6 in the entire book.
Yeah.
How many curse words do you think teenagers hear on a Netflix series? Probably more than
teenagers
6.
are saying
to
each other. Quite whispers.
And then the nudity, you can't even really. It's his mother when she commits suicide. It's a very sad thing that happened. That just broke my heart. But you can't even really. You can't see anything. He goes, it's not that. That's what they said, but that's not why.
No.
That's not why.
Yeah, I watched that same video, and I took a screenshot of the quote from the, I'm going to call him out here, Tony Allman, McMinn County School Board member.
Oh, yeah, I have the same one.
Oh, yeah? Yeah, this is what he says, quote, "It shows people hanging, it shows them killing kids. Why does the educational system promote this kind of stuff? It's not wise or healthy. Being in the schools, educators and stuff, we don't need to enable or somewhat promote this stuff."
Certainly not promoting it.
It's not promoting it, and
it's called history. It's called history. It's called real things that really happened. And we should read it, and we should be horrified. That's the purpose. I mean, history shouldn't be just rainbows and unicorns, because that's not how you learn. And
Yeah.
And Art Spiegelman had some really good burns in this interview.
What did he say?
Because regarding the nudity, and then in Mouse 2, there is nudity where they're in the gas chambers, but that's in the gas chambers.
It's
right?
Bodies, yeah.
It's bodies. What
and
he
again,
said
it really happened.
And it really happened. And Art said, "You'd have to really want to get your sexual kicks by projecting on them. And it seems like a crazy place to get them."
Yep, I heard him say that. Yep.
He's a riot. Line. Yeah, that's he writes graphic novels.
Yeah, he was cracking me up when he's like, "I didn't write this to teach a lesson. It was just a conversation with my dad."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how about the dad with a second wife?
Oh my gosh.
Oh, so sad.
So that whole relationship, I was
up.
Oh, it was like looking at my dad and his father. My grandfather is 99, and he served in the war. He's like one of the last, the last of the group to serve in World War II. So nothing with the Holocaust, but it's just similar dynamic of just like constantly. Like they have like a tender moment, and then somehow something is wrong, and they just like my grandpa just latches onto it, and I just saw that it was so. I don't know, that the greatest generation with their child growing up, trying to figure out this new world and the sacrifices they made, and it was just like the way that they wrote that relationship. And oh my gosh, the dad, Vladek, he gets remarried to this woman named Mala, and he just hates her.
He's so
dependent on her. But they just complain about each other, and they're just so grumpy with each other. It is so. Everyone at the assisted living center that I go visit my grandpa at, it is all.
Well, it brings a little bit, I think,
so mad
even
at
though
each other.
Yeah, I think it brings a little bit of comic relief to some very intense, serious content.
Yes.
And it also, I think, it brings a human side to it because you respect Vladek so much when he's going through all this as a young man and trying to save his wife that he loves so much, and just all the things that he does, and then now seeing him as like this, crotchety old man, like it's an interesting different personality that he has.
Yes.
So and with his son too, and it is great that they were able to connect over these stories that are important to keep alive.
Yeah. We should do just a quick summary of Mouse.
Yes, we should.
Yes. Eden, would you mind doing that?
Oh yeah, I could do that. So Mouse is divided into 2 books, serialized from, Nicolle said this earlier, 1980 to 91. And then the first one is about the Nazis slowly taking over Poland, where Vladek is from. And it cuts between Vladek's story in the past and Art and Vladek talking about it in the present at the time. The first book is a slow burn. They're not at Auschwitz yet. It's a slow burn of like just watching this dictatorship, one-party system, fascism taking over their part of the world. And you see like the amount of fear that is just in their everyday lives. It's about Vladek's early days as a young man. And then book 2 is about them actually entering Auschwitz and surviving Auschwitz.
And it should be noted that all the characters are drawn. So it is a graphic novel, and it is one of the first graphic novels. It's kind of the book that made graphic novels popular. And all of the characters are drawn as different animals. So all of the Jews are mice. And he uses that example and takes it from a quote by Hitler about Mickey Mouse. Was it about from Hitler? It's at the beginning of Mouse, though. We're going to find it real quick. But there's a quote. I think
it may be this one. The Jews are undoubtedly a race, but they are not human.
Okay, so that was the Hitler quote. This quote is, I was totally wrong. It's just from a newspaper article in Germany in the mid-1930s. And it says, Mickey Mouse is the most miserable ideal ever revealed. Healthy emotions tell every independent young man and every honorable youth that the dirty and filth-covered vermin, the greatest bacteria carrier in the animal kingdom, cannot be the ideal type of animal. Away with Jewish brutalization of the people, down with Mickey Mouse, wear the swastika cross. So Art is kind of flipping that on its head by making all of the Jews mice then. And so each different character, and eventually in the second book, he has a French wife, and he's like, do I make you a frog? And she's like, no, I'm also a mouse because I married you and I converted to Judaism. So like they have that conversation of how he should draw her. But and so you'll see like just the other Poles who are not Jewish, are they
pigs?
Pigs?
They're pigs.
Yeah.
And then the Nazis.
The Nazis are cats.
Cats. He was really grateful that the movie Five Folk, An American Tale came out after his book was published, but he believes that it was inspired by his book, because in that same book, the Mousekowitz are all mice, obviously, and the evil antagonists are all cats. So they also use that same exact. Oh my gosh! Can we return to that era of Disney?
I know.
Yeah, it's so good. But Yeah, so that's kind of how it plays. So you're not even seeing human bodies. That's the other thing about that ban is you're not
Right.
even seeing human bodies. So it's like if you're going to go hunting, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of issues with that argument is that these are still animals in this book. So I don't know, but it's very palatable and it's a quick read, honestly.
He's very economical with his word choice.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in a brilliant way, as most graphic novelists are.
Yeah.
I remember when graphic novels began to really pick up because I was teaching at the time or librarian at the time. I also taught TV production, but I was the librarian and TV production teacher.
Yeah.
And so graphic novels really were able to help a lot of reluctant readers read and learn. I mean, how many kids would pick up a history book about World War II over a graphic novel they could read in an afternoon? But graphic novels really started picking up, and I started purchasing a lot for my library and really reaching some of those reluctant readers or readers that maybe weren't really reluctant readers. Maybe they had reading challenges, and too much text on a page was just too hard. So anyway, and I had to really defend that to teachers, classroom teachers, because they'd bring our students in. You must get a real book, not, I'm like, well, first off, this is my library, and I allow children to check out whatever they choose here in this space. This is one of the only spaces on the campus that they have choice.
Yeah.
And so I had to pull some, statistics and some research about graphic novels and give it to them. But I wouldn't let a teacher come in and not allow a kid to check out a graphic novel. And I had this in my middle school library. I never read it at the time, but I had it in my middle school library. Both of them. So
it's such an interesting medium to me because I never really read a graphic novel before this. And it doesn't mean that it's just going to be completely left to right, left to right, left to right, up and down. He goes into different things at times. So you have to be present while reading in order to follow exactly where he's going to go on that page because the image kind of is king. And then the words follow. So it's a different skill set, but it was a different way of reading that really it was a cool exercise because I had to be so in the book to follow it perfectly. And I loved that because I'm just so used to kind of skimming sometimes and then moving on, but you can't do that with this.
No.
And
you don't really want to.
No.
You want to kind of keep staying in the story. I think I read it in 2 sittings maybe.
Yeah.
Just because it was that immersive. And even going back and forth, sometimes dual timelines and stories I'm not often a huge fan of because what I will often do, because I'm also an author, I'm a literary agent, I'm very immersed in the literary world, but a lot of times what I'll do when I'm reading a dual timeline is I'll get so invested in one timeline that I'm just going to read all the odd chapters until these timelines, mesh. And I've done that for many books. Or if it's dual POV, sometimes I'll just read,
So funny. I've never heard of anyone doing that, but it's brilliant. It's brilliant. Something else that I really liked about this medium is that Art Spiegelman explained that he loved having his father's tapes, and this was in an NPR piece written in 2022. And I'll link it, of course. He loved having his father's story on tapes and transcripts. But eventually, he said, the parts that are in the book are now in neat little boxes, I know what happened by having assimilated it that fully. So he was kind of explaining, it helped him process because he was able to put the trauma in those tiny boxes. Because as we know, and over the last few years, there have been such a better education about intergenerational trauma, what we inherit, how our families function who have gone through major trauma and how their PTSD impacts those around them. And this book really goes into that because Art kind of explains that he felt he had survivor's guilt at times. He resented his brother who died during the Holocaust because he was never going to be perfect like him because he complained and he yelled and he had tantrums, whereas his brother was just the silent picture who was the perfect son. And he will never understand all the sacrifice that his dad made. And also, this is like the 60s and 70s, and Art was trying to, like, was kind of doing the hippie thing, doing art stuff. He was an artist. He went to school for art. He dropped out of school. He did a lot of LSD. His dad was just so frustrated. And after he did his LSD, his mother died by suicide. So then he blamed himself for that. And then he went to the asylum. So you have this whole thing of like never being enough for these parents who survived this whole thing only to end up with you. And he is trying to cope with that. And the second book gets more into that. But the first book, you really learn the dynamic between him and his dad. You can tell his dad loves him, but his dad just genuinely doesn't know how to deal with people. And that's his aging process as well as the trauma, but he just doesn't know how to show that love to Art. Like at one point he throws Art's jacket away because he thinks it's ugly. And he gives Art a different jacket. He's like, this is nicer. And you know that the dad's intention was like, I want my son to look sharp. And I don't want him, look fresh, but I don't want him to be like a hippie kid. But Art just saw it as such like an assault on his selfhood, and was just like grumpy. And so you just see that dynamic while they're trying to talk about the Holocaust. It is a wild choice, but it was so good.
It's such a great, they're such great books. It's not just world history, it's a personal history too.
It's family.
It's family.
Yeah, it's family.
And all family has challenges. And so when you were talking to Nicolle about their relationship, it was kind of making me think of a relationship with one of my parents that had a lot of trauma, and that trauma bled into our family and caused me some trauma. And now my parents are in their 70s. And so they're not those people anymore. And so now I want that relationship kind of like how he did with his father. And even though you don't want to ignore the past and what happened, but can we come to a new place before I don't have access to you anymore?
Yes.
And I kind of felt like Art was he was at that point in his life where despite how he felt growing up with his dad, and they weren't that close, his dad was at a point in his life where he wanted to have that access to him and that piece of him, even though it did come with some trauma.
Yeah.
And I think he captured that beautifully in this. It's almost like a love letter to his dad.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
I kind of felt that way. I just got goosebumps saying that.
Yeah. I felt that way. And I don't even think Art realized that it was. Because he still was so visibly critical of his dad. And the second book, he brings in his wife, Francois, and she kind of plays that outside voice of like, your dad's gone through a lot. Maybe we should. But then she still gets frustrated with him.
This is kind of a funny story. So my grandmother passed away 20 years ago, maybe 15. It's been a while. She and I were very close. And so when she found out that she had cancer and it was terminal, she called me and she said, I'd like for you to deliver my eulogy. And I said, okay. And she said, I'd like you to write it before I die so I can read it. And I'm like, that is so Ruth Wiggins. So I did it. But who doesn't want to hear all the nice things people are going to say about you before?
Yeah, do that living funeral. Yeah.
So I wrote it for her and gave it to her, and she gave me the stamp of approval. And then come a few months later, and she's passed, and I'm there at the funeral home delivering the eulogy. And afterwards, her kids come up to me and they're like, who was that about? So, and it was kind of a little bit of a lighthearted moment because she was tough on her kids. And there were some strained relationships in that family. But she was always so good to me. Good to me. And that was I kind of enjoyed telling that story because that's in all families, right?
That's family. I have a different relationship with my grandparents than my dad and his brother have with their parents, for sure. I have a different relationship with my mom than my eldest sibling has with my mom. Because she was a different person when she had me. She'd grown up a lot. And I wonder with Art, like, I don't know, he plays, so they gave this, there's been a critique against Art about how he portrays his father, that he kind of portrays his father as a miserly old Jew, and it fits into that stereotype.
Yeah.
And Art's response, and I'm sure you guys all saw this, Art's response was, well, my dad was really tight with money as he got older. And yes, that was just part of who he was. It has nothing to do with him being Jewish, but also that's who he was. He wasn't a caricature. He just was who he was. And if I was going to pretend like he wasn't that way, then what am I doing? Like he didn't survive because he was better than other people. He didn't survive because he was perfect, because he was a lovely person, because he was so charitable. He survived because he was lucky.
Yep.
And that's the horror of the Holocaust, you know?
Yep.
Like
it amazed me that they both made it out.
Yeah. I couldn't believe that his mother made it out. That was where I was like, oh my gosh.
But even like I'm trying to remember the numbers here. He has a family tree at the end of
the second, probably
the second one, but it went from like 85 people to 20-ish. It was at the end of. It's a box. So I got the box set, and there's like a little zine inside.
Okay, we don't have that.
Got the box set.
Okay, tell us about the zine.
But take a look at this. So this is the family before the Holocaust. A ton of real, like, filled in boxes. The grayed out ones, they died prior to the Holocaust. And in here,
oh my gosh,
like, not even. I think that's like 10. 1, 2, 3. We'll have to figure out how to show this to our listeners.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of empty boxes.
And I think image is so important. I just got chills from that. That's horrifying.
So get the box set, you guys.
Well, I definitely want to read the second one now that I read the first.
Yeah.
100%.
I think a lot of people like try to read meaning into surviving. Like what you guys were just talking about, how it really was just luck.
Yeah.
And
like
I was
sure,
gonna go somewhere with there, but
did clever things, and sure, he was assertive, and he spoke English, which saved him in a lot of situations. But bottom line, like even in all those situations, he could have been shot each time. Like it didn't really. Nothing was gonna be good enough because this was genocide, and so like just nothing was gonna be good enough to save you.
I was really struck hard at the times that I saw the places these people had to hide.
Yes. Oh, goodness, yes. That was done so well in the book.
And how scared his wife was when he would leave. I mean, she would be like in a cellar with no food for days with rats, but he had to go to find food. It's a love story too. You know, it really is.
It is.
They loved each other.
Yeah.
It was their romance was beautiful within the horror of that backdrop.
Yeah. And it was also funny how they courted, how even then there were moments where Vladek was like, she wasn't even that good looking, but she could talk real well. I just wanted to talk to her all the time. Like he'd constantly still give that little dig no matter what. Like it was just, and you could see Art just like pulling his hair out and just being like, are you serious? But still, there was so much romance. But the more consistent he was with that character, you really did. I really felt so much love for Vladek and so much compassion for him. And yeah, I thought, it is a love story. It's a love story between Art and his dad and between Art and his late wife. I mean, not Art, Vladek and his late wife.
And Vladek is the reason why Art got into comics, because kind of going to pinch and pennies in his later years. What was that?
Used ones for him.
Yep. He bought like 2-for-1s comic books for him. Just like, oh, I can get one of these new ones for 10 cents, or I could get 2 to 3 for 10 cents. I'll do 2 to 3. So he had a plethora of comics in his household, just reading and consuming.
That's so cute. I didn't see that. That's so cute. Oh my gosh. So, Amy, you keep bringing up love about this book. What other themes did you guys like really feel when you were reading it that because I'm thinking in the mind of like a high schooler, why do I want a high schooler to read this book? I think the complicated relationship with the father is an obvious one. It's like, you're going to have complicated relationships. Those are normal. It doesn't mean you don't love each other.
Well, and also I think dealing with aging parents, or aging grandparents for a child. I'm in my 50s, and so most of my friends, that's what we're dealing with right now is, our aging parents. And how do we hold on to some of those memories before it's too late? So my young adult novel debuts in May of next year, and it takes place in Central Florida. And my father's from Southern Mississippi, so he made gumbo all the time, us growing up as kids. And in my novel, gumbo is on the page a lot. It's my main character's favorite food that her dad makes. And so I had never written down my dad's recipe or even ever tried to make it in all these years. And so that's a part of my dad I don't want to ever lose. Kind of like Art wanted to know his dad's story before it was too late for him to hear it and to have it tangible. So I called my dad one day and I'm like, Dad, can I record a phone call of you telling me how to make your gumbo? Because he didn't want to write it all out. And he said, sure. And so I called him and I'm recording it, and he is cracking me up as he's telling me how to make this gumbo. Things like chop the peppers and the okra and all the vegetables first, and chop the onion last, just so your eyes won't burn as long. Just things like that, just cracking me up. And I have that recording, and then I transcribed it. And I said that at the top, like, this is the gumbo that Angela eats on her birthday. This is the gumbo she eats the night of her baby shower. This is the gumbo she eats, blah, 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 blah. And then here's her, the real Angela, who's me. The book is a fictionalized version of my life. But then I transcribed exactly how he said it. And so I'm so glad that I have that. It is bonus material. It's actually on my website already. I already put it up. But it'll be bonus material for the book, because hopefully people will want to have gumbo after they finish it. But that I wanted that piece of my dad, and I have that recording phone conversation too that I hopefully will always have. It's just those memories matter. They really, really do. And regardless, again, of the past trauma, those are your parents. There's something you can learn from them, even if it's not a life lesson. Maybe it's something this is what you don't want to do with your life, but there's always something we can learn from people that have gone before us.
Oh,
for sure.
I'm so excited about that book. I want to read that, May.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. That's very exciting. I like anything that has to do with gumbo. Anything that's food oriented. Anytime we cross the mediums and we bring food in, I get very excited.
For sure.
Marianne Hirsch, and I believe she's also a writer, she explained Spiegelman's life, and I think this touches on what you were talking about, Amy, as being dominated by memories that are not his own. And she talks about how a lot of the relationship between children of survivors with the survivors themselves, that these children do not have their parents' experiences, but they grew up with their parents' memories. And those memories are theirs, and they have a deep, deep personal relationship with those memories, even though there's generational distance. And so that's basically the essence of transgenerational trauma. And we see that happening right now with the fear that a lot of people do feel about the growing anti-Semitism, just the trauma of that. There is a fear of like, where will I hide? And even in the second mouse, Art explains that he has nightmares of not knowing where to hide, of having to run out of school when he's in elementary school and go somewhere to hide, just because he carries that. And I think, if anything, this book should help us build sympathy for other people. We don't know what things they're carrying and what fears they have that they have inherited, because, I don't have that fear. I've never experienced it. I'm not Jewish. I'm also not Muslim. I am not of a minority group in our country. And so I cannot imagine. But it should, at the least, build some sort of sympathy to say, even though you're not a Holocaust survivor, I know it's in your family, and I know that you carry that, and that is a thing. And like, because it is part of them, just like the gumbo. I'm so excited about that. I'm going to make it. I'm going to find it on your website and make it.
Yeah.
I'm going
It's
to
there.
tag you in pictures. Good.
This reminds me of our conversation that we had on The Giver about the importance of telling family stories, and how children can learn resilience from those. Like, I mean, I don't have any living grandparents left, and I come from a culture that did not talk about things. So I imagine, like, this is probably me reading a lot into intergenerational trauma, but the fact that, like, Vladek was so old and, like, so many Holocaust survivors lived to such old ages, I think it is because they talked about it. They talked about it, they shared their trauma, they shared their suffering, and they suffered together as a community. Whereas my family went through the Cultural Revolution, did not talk about it. My last grandparent died when she was 85. I don't remember how old I was. I think I had just graduated college. So this is, how old am I? Oh my gosh, we're like 10 years. I'm like 10 years from graduating college. Holy cow. So 10 years ago, like a decade ago, I lost my last grandparent. And imagine, like, I wonder if people would have survived if we talked about it. I wonder if my grandparents would still be alive today if we talked about it. And I very much feel like at the end of Mouse 1, Vladek admits to throwing away Anya's journals, diaries, and Art calls him a murderer. He's like, "You murdered my mother. Like, the memories of my mother, you threw them away as if they were just trash." And like I feel a little bit of that, having some language barrier with my grandparents, and also two of them had passed before I was able to talk to them. Really. But I feel like there is, like, if my family history was a puzzle, there are missing pieces. You know, there are just like aspects of my family history that I will never know because I never had that relationship with my grandparents. And that's like what I feel compelled to do after reading Mouse, is like what you did, Amy, of just like calling up my parents and being like, "So,
tell me some stories."
Just tell me some stories.
And that's a beautiful thing for Art, to inspire kids to want to talk to their parents and grandparents and to hear those stories, because there will come a time where they won't be around anymore. And I was very angry when I saw that he had gotten rid of those journals. Like, I felt it. I felt Art's anger, but I also kind of understood Vladek too. Those memories were painful for him. You know, he loved her so much that those memories were painful. So it's like both sides. But I do think, Eden, that you're absolutely right, that talking about things and sharing your trauma with other people, it's therapeutic. And, you know, therapy isn't just for your emotional state. It does impact your health. You know, if you're under a lot of trauma or stress and don't have an emotional outlet for it. So I think 100%, you know, those Holocaust survivors and people that have gone through trauma that take that and then they share it with other people, you know, it helps make it easier. So my novel that comes out in May is about teen pregnancy and domestic abuse. And it's inspired by a real lived experience I had when I was 17. And I've had, after writing it, I've been writing this book a long time. I've had people, beta readers and stuff, come to me and be like, "Are you okay?" after reading it. I'm like, "Yes, I'm fine." They're like, "Well, all of that stuff in your book that happened." I'm like, "But that was 35 years ago. It's a lot of time has passed between now and then, and I've shared it with a lot of people." And you know, writing it too, writing things, and I'm sure this book was so therapeutic for Art. You know, because then it's kind of like it's out there and it's done. You know, because then you've shared it with the world. It's no longer your burden to bury alone.
Yes. And it's in those little boxes, like you said. He was able to finally put them there, so it didn't just sit inside of him.
I love that analogy, that when he talked about putting them, in those
Yeah.
boxes. Yeah, okay, that's put away, that's put away, that's put away.
Yeah.
It's all done.
Yeah. Like, it's still going to be part of him for the rest of his life. It's obviously still going to be something that he's going to have to work through consistently, but it's no longer, from what he said, it seems like it's no longer haunting him the way it did. You know, it's in a controlled space. He's more than just that now.
Well, and I urge your listeners to Google him and listen to some of his interviews. He's a fascinating person to listen to.
He seems like someone that you can tell is on their journey to healing. And that's a gratifying book. Because, because it should inspire us all to get onto that journey too, and whatever that might look like. But it seems like it's someone who is trying to sort it out. I mean, there's no easy tie up in the end. Even the second book just is basically the last image, but it's just the two gravestones of his father's headstone and his mother's headstone. That's the last image. And we know his dad eventually died. That doesn't have to be, but that's not like it wasn't just like a nice little tie up of like the story. That didn't just finish the story for me, but it was just like, okay, that's where we are, and we just keep moving forward. And people pass on, but we have to keep moving forward.
And it's almost like that is the end of his dad's physical existence. But fortunately, Art did what he did, and his father will live on for all of eternity through this book.
Yeah.
So, and one of the things when I think about banned books, and I'm not saying it's a good thing at all this is happening, because it's not, but I think those of us that then are curious, what are we doing?
Yeah.
We're buying them like crazy and reading them, and we are elevating these stories to show that we care and we're doing our part.
Yes, that's so true. I would never have read them without this podcast.
This is my first time reading them as well.
Yeah. And we like to say, like, Eden and I have talked about this. I think like the simplest form of activism is just to read a banned book. It's the simplest thing, but it will change you and make you a better person. It'll increase your empathy so that you can be more of a force in the world around you. And it's the easiest way of becoming the person you want to be, is just read a banned book. Read one banned book with compassion. That's it. Yeah.
Well, and you're also supporting those authors which I value very much. I buy so many books. Everybody I know that writes a book, I buy it. just I want to support them. I want to support them, because being a creative and putting your story out there, it's vulnerable. And then to end up on a list like your story doesn't matter,
or it's
like your
bad,
story should be erased,
or it's
right?
Evil,
right?
Yeah. What you've created from your soul is evil, and what you've experienced in your life is evil. That's all. Like, that is where it's like, oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the banning of memoirs is fascinating to me. Because I feel like it mirrors the end of book one of just like, oh, you murderer, like you are erasing this person's existence from. Well, you're trying to erase them from eternity, and that is just wild to me.
Well, and that's what Dave Peltzer's book was a memoir. The child called it, and those things really did happen, and just like in Art's book. And I want to read about people that suffer and come out on the other side and triumph over that. They're okay. They're okay.
Yes.
They made it. I can, and you just really respect them so much for seeing how bad things were and that they did it. They're okay.
Yeah, it's the stories of resilience.
Yes.
Yeah.
We inherit trauma, but we also inherit the resilience of our ancestors. I just have loved this conversation so much. We don't want to take too much of your time, Amy, but what other thoughts do you have? Like, are there any things that you feel like we've got to bring up?
Not really. I'm just really grateful for the both of you, and I'm super grateful for Art Spiegelman for writing this book and allowing us the privilege of reading his family's story. It was an absolute honor.
Me too. Wow, you're making me want to cry. I don't know why. I just think it feels like holy ground to be able to talk about the suffering and the fact that we can get through it, and the fact that we're all trying to do something to keep these stories. Stories are living and they're very important. More compassion, everybody.
More compassion.
More compassion.
Humanitarianism.
More humanitarianism.
Everybody deserves to be on this planet.
Yes.
Nobody deserves it more than anyone else.
No. And as we continue to see all these different disasters throughout the world and horrors and genocides, I'm going to start looking for books by authors from all these different regions that we can make a list of. But yeah, if any of our listeners have ideas of how to help all sides, all the people, that's what we'd like to do.
Yeah.
And listeners, if any of you are authors, I'm an associate literary agent with the Purcell Agency, and I want your stories. I want your stories of marginalized populations and identities that I don't identify with, and I'm looking for LGBTQ representation, neurodivergent representation, BIPOC representation. I want to hear your stories. Those are the stories that I want to read and that I want to work on. So the next Art Spiegelman can query me.
Yay!
I was just going to ask how people can reach out to you, Amy.
Sure. Well, my website is www.amynielsen.com. And I am also at the Purcell Agency. Right now, I'm currently closed for queries, but I'll be opening up back again in January, February. And you can find my manuscript wish list on Manuscript Wishlist, kind of to see what I'm looking for.
Okay, cool.
If your book would be banned in Florida, I want it.
That's a great pitch.
That's my tagline.
That's a good call out. Oh my gosh.
Awesome.
I don't have anything else to say.
This was a great conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
By you. Oh, Amy, anytime you want to be back, you were so edifying. Seriously, I feel so filled. Like my cup is so full. Seriously.
I was so excited for this to have a conversation with the two of you, and so I would love to read another book and have another conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, please do.
Yes, I would love that. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm gonna leave this chat.
Burn This Book is produced by us, Nicolle and Eden.
Music by myself, Nicolle, and performed by my dad, Frank.